218-2255. We're live on Facebook. Nigel in Wigan, good morning.
Good morning.
First caller, Nigel, off you go.
Morning, Nigel.
Good morning. I run a coach company in Wigan. We have 7 vehicles. None of them are compliant with Euro 6. Some of them can't even be retrofitted. We've had more support throughout the COVID pandemic and had to take on a civils loan, which has now put us in £173,000 of more debt. Our 7 vehicles, if they were out every day through the year in Wigan, we'd be paying an extra £153,300 in this charge alone. How are we supposed to survive?
Andy?
Well, it's a fair question, Nigel. I'm not going to, waffle and back away from it. It's a worry that I've got as well. Let me just get straight to it, Mike, and you and I have discussed this before. We can't ignore the requirement from government to clean up the air in Greater Manchester. We just can't ignore that. And it's right that we should clean up the air, but we've got to do it in a way that is manageable for our businesses and businesses like Nigel's. Now, Nigel, you're a transport business, so obviously your coaches are your primary investment. That's true, isn't it? I'm sure you would have had a plan to replace your vehicles over time. In this situation, funding...
That plan has gone completely out the window with having to take a civils loan. We were given no help throughout the pandemic.
Nigel, Nigel, do you mind me asking you, could you go bust? Could you go bankrupt?
I will definitely go bankrupt. There's no doubt about it.
Well, Nigel, I'm not trying to sort of say it's easy, because it isn't. And I realise that the coach sector was particularly hard hit 2020, 2021. I absolutely accept that. But the point I was just making is obviously there is a public subsidy available here to help businesses and others upgrade vehicles, which in normal times isn't available. So there is some help on the table. But Mike, I've said to you before, we don't believe it is enough. But secondly, things changed late last year because the vehicle market, basically the supply chain has broken down to a degree. So vehicles aren't coming onto the market, which is making it harder for businesses like Nigel's to find vehicles that they can afford to change. So things have changed. Mike, you know me, I come on this programme because I'm somebody who listens. And when I hear what people are saying, I'm always prepared to act. And that's why at the moment we are reviewing this situation. There was a clear change in the second half of 2021 with regard to the vehicle market.
Andy, you didn't have to implement this till 2024. Why is it coming in now? You've got another 2 years or more before you actually had to implement it. And that people like Nigel, that's his life finished.
No, it's not quite like that, Mike. It is a complex situation. 2024 is the date by which the air has to become legal standard across Greater Manchester. So the job has to be done by then. And obviously to get to that point, you have to start bringing in measures to cut air pollution from road traffic. So we've tried our best to give as much time as possible to people, because we have a phased approach to this, and there'll be, it's not all coming in this year, but there has been a change for the reasons that Nigel is giving. I mean, I'm not in any way dismissing what he's saying. The pandemic has caused a real problem for a number of our businesses, and we have been reviewing that. We've been looking at those issues, and leaders in Greater Manchester will be meeting next week to discuss where we go from here. It's a challenging situation. But if we work together and people don't, it's not, people are kind of pointing at us as though we've just dreamt this up and it's all a tax raising scheme and, it's all our idea. Well, it isn't actually. We've no choice but to bring in measures to cut air pollution. It's an instruction from the government. What we want to do is do it in the right way that cleans up the air and helps our businesses make this change.
I'm going to bring Mark in Tameside in a second. In Birmingham, they did it in a far smaller area under. Yes, you have to implement this, but the methodology could be different. And in Birmingham, it is different. It's a smaller area, albeit it includes private cars. Why didn't you bring that system in?
So, yeah, fair question, Mike. And that is something that was determined at a local level to a degree, in that the government has instructed every council in Greater Manchester to take action because there is illegal air pollution in all 10. So that, I don't know what the situation was in Birmingham. I don't think it was as widespread, the problem that they had. So that's point number one. But point number two, as you said, they've included cars. And we believe that would open this up in a much wider way. You know, we're talking primarily about businesses here, aren't we? Businesses, not exclusively, but largely. When you're talking about coaches, buses, HGVs, taxis, vans, they are largely businesses who, you know, will invest in their vehicles in the normal run of things. To open it up to cars, Mike, is obviously opening up a massively different issue. And we decided not to do that so that we didn't hit people who would really struggle with it. That was part of the logic. If I could just say, given that all 10 of our councils got this instruction, if we didn't go for what we've done, we'd have had like a patchwork of local zones all over the place, and people just wouldn't know where they were working. In effect, it would be the same thing because people would be driving in and out of boroughs and not knowing where the clean air zones start and end. So we're kind of where we are. I don't think we had much alternative. I'm not saying it's, you know, I'm not trying to, I just think we need to find a solution. National government, local government working together to see if we can get people through this. Let
me bring Mark in. We've heard from Nigel. Thank you, Nigel, for phoning, by the way, who effectively could go bankrupt with this. Mark in Tameside. Hi, Mark.
Hiya, Mike.
Good morning.
Hiya, Andy.
Off you go, Mark.
First of all, I want to congratulate Andy from being one of the most liked mayors last year through COVID, standing up for the people of Manchester. He's now become the most unliked mayor of Manchester. I don't know how he can do it so fast, but there's 32,000 members on Facebook who don't say nice things about Andy Burnham anymore.
But let's move away from that, Mark, and get your question to Andy.
The question is, I've got 8 ice cream vans. Our company's been trading 100 years, after just through one world war and through COVID. Now, we're going to have to close this summer if you bring this tax in. 8 vans going out 6 days a week is £480 a week. On the year, it's £24,960 a year. Now, we can't afford that. We've been running 100 years, and you brought this tax in. I know you keep saying about the government. The government have told you to get the pollution down, but I've had good authority from 2 MPs who've contacted me saying that this is your idea. The government have told you to get the air down, but this is actually your idea. So, and another thing is, you can get a grant to buy new vans, but a new ice cream van used to be £70,000. Now, they've gone up this year to 90,000 because there's no supplies of vans.
Mark, I need you, Mark. I'm really sorry to interrupt me, but I do need you to get to the point and ask the question.
Point is, how do we're going to go out of business. How do we afford £24,960 a year?
Andy.
And that is a very fair question, Mike. And it's one that I'm asking as well, because as I said to you before, Mike, things changed in the vehicle supply market last year. So this isn't something that, you know, is a fixed issue. It's changing all of the time. And I'm not dismissing in any way, Mark said. I do take issue with him, though, about saying that this is something I dreamt up and this is my tax, if you like, on working people. It really isn't, Mark. This comes from the government losing a court case against an organisation called Client Earth. And what that led to was the government saying to cities across the country, not just us, that they, on the back of that court case, had to introduce measures to cut the air pollution by the date that Mike said before, 2024, because there'd been a failure to act. And they said a charging clean air zone was their view of what was needed. And that's what they said to us. And that's the position that we've been in. So we're not necessarily working against that. How can we work against cleaning up our air? You know, people say to me, oh, you should have just told them to whatever. But I can't do, how can I do that? I can't ignore a legal instruction. And in fact, it's actually not on me. It's on the 10 councils. In some ways, I'm trying to facilitate here to get a solution between national and local government. But anyway, I mean, some of that, obviously, it doesn't suit people's purposes for me to point some of that out. So anyway, it doesn't matter. We need to get a solution. Mark, you are in a difficult position. I fully recognise that. And it's why I was asking people to do a review of the situation so that we could provide the help to people that's needed. And the work that's been going on that is coming back to us now. And I will be meeting with the 10 leaders of Greater Manchester next week to discuss it and see where we go from here. You mentioned it's going to come in this year, it's going to put you out of business this year. Well, it's not, because the vans element wouldn't come in anyway until the middle of 2023. So it's not as imminent as you might think. I think there's been a lack of information, Mike, and I think maybe this is our fault. More information should have been out there so people can find out the facts. I think we're lacking a few facts in this debate at the moment, but that perhaps is down to us. We should have done a better job there. What I would say to this morning, Mike, and I hope I can get this message over to people, in my political career, I have never been somebody who doesn't listen or who doesn't speak up for working people. I do speak up for working people. I take great pride, actually, in doing that. What I would say is, if everyone wants to there's certain MPs, you mentioned MPs, well, there's certain MPs out there who want to make this all about me and Greater Manchester because it suits their purposes to do that. It means that the government gets off the hook. The truth of the matter is, I think we as Greater Manchester need to go back to the government and say, we have tried to do this in good faith. You asked us or you instructed us to do this. We have tried to do it, but we are now worried about the situation because we can't do it without really damaging some people's jobs and businesses. Andy,
I'm back with you in a second. Andy Burnham, read the final paragraph of a statement you make. And it said that Greater Manchester leaders will consider the outcome of this work next week before asking the Clean Air Joint Committee to consider the implications for the Clean Air Plan later this month. We are committed to reducing air pollution in Greater Manchester, but also to protecting jobs and the livelihoods of our residents. We are listening carefully to concerns being expressed about the current situation and will make a decision shortly on our next steps. What more can you give us on that, Andy?
Well, not a great deal, Mike, because obviously we're in a position where we've got to come to an agreement with the 10 councils, and I'm not shying away from it. I'm not saying it's people think I'm saying nothing to do with me. It is something to do with me. I've got to work with our 10 myself as well to get a solution here that's right for us, and we're going to discuss it next week. And I can't preempt that discussion. But what I would say, Mike, is this isn't the first time all of this has come up on the hot seat, is it? You and I had callers last year, didn't we? People who were beginning to say to me, "I'm going to really struggle with this." Do you remember?
I do.
I mean, and I said to you last year, I think we might have to have a whole programme on this. Well, because I was picking up what people were saying, and it's actually that, Mike, that led me to go back to the team at TFGM and say, I think more work needs to be done here to understand what is going on in the vehicle market. So, Mike, we came up with money from the government to help us make this change, and it was linked to the price of vehicles, how much grant you're going to get and then what the cost of the new vehicle is, and it was meant to be affordable. But something changed. I felt, listening to your callers on this hot seat, Mike, that something was changing and people were getting worried because of the lack of affordability and availability of vehicles. And that is the work that I commissioned, and that is the work that's coming back to leaders of Greater Manchester next week.
Are we going to see, Andy, the removal of when I say the removal, the pushing back of deadlines, basically, till you get more information? And as you said earlier, maybe the information you've been given out hasn't been fit for purpose. So to improve that and to give people more of a chance to deal with this, do you think that those the restrictions that are going to be introduced, that the introduction could be pushed back a bit?
Well, it's not in our gift, and this is why it's a bit frustrating for me when everyone says, Greater Manchester this, Andy Burnham that. We've got a responsibility here to make this work for people and, clean up the air and all the rest of it, Mike. But we are not in control of the policy, and this is the point. The government put an instruction on our councils for a clean air zone, and it set the deadline.
But you would agree with that, Andy, though. You are sympathetic.
Oh, well, hold on, Mike. Only I'm going to come back to you. Only the government can change that, the fundamentals of that. Where I agree is, I think we should do this if, and it's a big if, it's fully funded and it's fair to people. And here's where the big problem arose, Mike, in the middle of last year, where I think we've become increasingly concerned. When we did the financial deal with the government around this, they refused to fund what we were calling back then a hardship fund. And this was always intended to be money for people who have the oldest vehicles, but are people who are, let's say, individual operators, sole traders, self-employed. We always knew that they would find it hardest to change. And the government refused to put in place specific funding for that group of people. And that's where our problems began, Mike. And then later in the year, there was this problem with the change in the vehicle supply market. So we have been watching and we have been kind of paying close attention to this. And it's obviously blown up in the media in the last few days.
Let me bring Sean in Denton in. We talked to two businesses, but Sean is one of those individuals that you were talking about. Sean, good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you so much for waiting for us. Your question for Andy, please.
Morning, Sean.
I've got a couple of points, to be honest. You've just mentioned about sole traders, and I'm one of them. I took a loan out for my van 2 years ago, so I've got 3 years left on my current loan. Now, you mentioned there's probably not been as much information about the grant scheme or any of this, to be honest with you, in the local media, and it's not very clear. What is the grant scheme? Does it involve second-hand vehicles, or is it just purposely new vehicles? Because if that's the case, it's useless for me, to be honest with you.
Andy?
Yeah, so the scheme is a mixture, to be honest, Sean. So it could be a grant, it can be a loan, or it can be support to retrofit the vehicle if the vehicle is capable of being retrofitted. So that's basically the scheme that has been agreed. It isn't yet active though. Is it a van that you're talking about?
Sean? So is it a van you're talking about?
It is, yes. It's a small van.
So Sean, that isn't live, that funding stream at the moment, this moment in time, because obviously, as I said before, vans are not coming into the scope of the scheme until the middle of next year. But the kind of three options that were put forward are grant, loan, or funding to retrofit the vehicle, and that is what currently will come forward. If there's no change, but as I've been saying today, things have changed, and we have to respond to the change that's happened out there.
You're just talking, Andy. Thank you, Sean, by the way, for phoning about the 3 Fs: fully funded and fair.
Yep.
Have you been back to the government to tell them that this isn't fully funded and fair?
Oh, absolutely. But you see, the thing was, Mike, this was a big issue at the mayoral election campaign. I don't know if you remember that. So it's not true that no one's been discussing it. We have been discussing it, and I made the point then. This was before the government did their final financial settlement with us. That this was only going to be fair to people if it came with the funding to help people make the change. And that was the basis on which we were working. And what happened was, in July, the government came up with its final financial package, which it was a bit of a take it or leave it. And they, remember Tier 3, and it has a bit of a parallel actually to that whole debate where the government imposes something, but they don't fully fund it. But they then refused this element of funding, which was for those people who were going to find it hardest. And that is where our problems started, to be honest with you, Mike. So I've been looking at that ever since, and I've been thinking, well, how are we going to help people make the change? And we're in a position where I think it's very difficult now to see how some people can make this change without it causing real damage to their businesses or real hardship. So that's the place that we find ourselves in. That's the discussion that we have to have with our leaders next week about what we do about this. And I'm afraid, it's a holding position for now until we've had that discussion. But that's where the problem comes from. I'm not saying the government are wrong. The government have been working with us so far, but they need to carry on working with us.
I'm going to bring Dave. Sorry, I was going to say, Andy, I'm going to bring David in Stockport, and I'll try and get as many of these calls in as I can. A lot of stuff on Clean Air Zone today. We are at the moment concentrating on that. We may well give you the chance on other issues to get in touch with us. But ring us on 0800 218 2255. We're on Facebook Live. It's the Hot Seat. It's Thursday. Andy Burnham's the Mayor of Greater Manchester answering your questions. I've got so many texts, but at the moment, again, we're inundated with calls, and that's the best way to get hold of us. I will try and find a bit of time to put one or two of the texts to Andy. David in Stockport is with me now. David, good morning.
Hiya, good morning.
Hi, David.
My question is, in your manifesto, your first line in it was this was going to be fair to businesses and to working people. I'm self-employed, so straight away, this is not fair to me. Further down, you're talking about the funding. This pot of 120 million. How many lorries, coaches, everything else is going to be able to get into this pot of 12,000, 16,000 to retrofit all these vehicles before it gets to the bands? That pot will be gone. On simple maths, that pot needs to be about 4 times the size of what that pot is. So it isn't going to help us all. And that, towards the end of it, you said no person will lose a job because of this. I was planning on taking an apprentice on next year. I've already told him, if I have to pay this, I can't afford you. That's all. So he's already going to be gone. If this comes in, I told him I cannot afford this.
David, can I just interrupt you very quickly, David? What do you do for a living? What is your current situation, please?
I'm self-employed, Tyler. There's just me. So this tax, I already pay emissions tax, which is your old road tax, on my vehicle of £340 a year, I think it is. So with this new one, I've worked out roughly what days I used my van last year. With that and the new tax, that's nearly £4,000 a year tax I'm going to be paying, emissions tax I'm going to be paying on my van. £4,000 tax, that's equivalent of someone earning 24 grand a year.
David, I'm going to bring Andy in now, though, to respond to that. Andy?
Well, I'm not going to disagree with the points because they're fair points, Mike. You mentioned, if I could, though, just say, David, you mentioned people who've got buses and lorries and coaches. Well, a lot of those are big businesses, aren't they? And they should be making the changes. I personally, Mike, don't agree with some of the clapped out old buses that some of the bus companies put on our roads. I think they should be investing in their vehicles. I think they should be putting cleaner vehicles on the roads for the residents of Greater Manchester. I think that goes for some HGV operators as well. And I think one of the effects of the clean air zone is it will stop HGVs cutting through some of our communities, and it will keep those vehicles on the big roads. I've got total sympathy with David, if I can answer this point, Mike, is the government gave us a fixed pot. They didn't give us funding to particularly help businesses like David's, and the cost of vehicles that are compliant has risen, and that is where the problem comes from. Those two things are the kind of root of this problem. That failure to fund to support sole traders who need to change, and the change in the market. And that is why I commissioned the work that I did together with Andrew Weston, who's the leader of Trafford. We're working together on this, trying to get a good solution for Greater Manchester.
But moving back to David, Andy, he is a sole trader, and this could crucify him. Yeah. And there'll be people like David out there, Andy, who are going to say to you, Andy, if this comes in next year, I'm finished. I'm on the dole. How do we address that?
I know, and I said to you, Mike, I was hearing that last year on the hot seat, and obviously I'm hearing it very much now, and I'm worried about that as well. And people keep saying it's our tax. Well, we can't stop it. If it was our tax or our charge, it's not a tax actually. But anyway, let's not get into the debate of that, because it will feel like a tax to people. But if it was the case and we could stop it, well, that would be a fair thing for people to be like really shouting at us about. But we can't. We are not in a position to stop this because the government lost a court case and had to impose this. I mean, that's just, and only they can change the deadline or change the scheme or whatever it is that needs to be done to make this fairer, particularly the finances. That's the reality of the situation, Mike. I know people kind of will say, "Oh no, he's just saying this. He's trying to deflect it." I'm on this hot seat answering questions. What I would say to you, get the government on this hot seat. Let's have them answering some questions about this. Let's have them giving David an answer to his situation. It's fine for me to come on, and I don't mind coming on, and I will answer questions all day on this. But let's have the government on here. Let's have them answering some questions, and let's hear what they are doing to help sole traders and self-employed people who've struggled through the pandemic and are now expected to do this to the government's timetable. I think that's a fair shout back from me, Mike. And what I would say is let's try and stick together on this as Greater Manchester, because if we stick together on this and we don't let some people with an agenda make it all about an anti-Labour thing or an anti-me, whatever they want to do. Let's go back to them with one voice and say, you know what, this isn't fair for us. We need something different. And that's how I think we'll get a result for people.
Got a load of stuff in, Andy, obviously on social media, on Facebook and on WhatsApp and on text, etc. I just want to, and it's difficult because I've got so many calls coming in, and I have to say at the moment, they do seem to be on the same subject, but we've got so many, and it's fair to you to put you on air. But Julie on Facebook said this, Andy, I don't live in Greater Manchester. I'm 2 miles out in a rural area. My life revolves around Rochdale, school, work, shops, traders, and have a company using small trade shops in Rochdale. I'm not entitled to apply for a grant as I'm not resident in Greater Manchester. Do I take my trade an extra 5 miles the other way? This is hitting small traders. I can't remember the last time I went to the city centre, let alone beyond Rochdale. So Julie's 2 miles out, would come in to the zone, would pay the amount, but can't get any help whatsoever, Andy.
Well, honestly, Mike, it's a really fair question. And I heard the Warrington MP, Conservative MP, making a similar point on the radio this morning. A fair question, but I would say back to that Member of Parliament, well, perhaps knock on the door of your government, because obviously they have decided not to help Julie or his constituents with that issue. And I am concerned about that as well, Mike, because I live close to the border of Greater Manchester, close to St Helens, where I know a lot of people come into Greater Manchester to work. So, this is why I think we have to review the situation that we are in and go back to the government and say, look, I think you need to do more here because these businesses have struggled during the pandemic. It's too convenient just to say, oh, well, we've given the money, that's it. Because as I think it was David said, wasn't it? £120 million will go quite quickly, actually, given the scale of this challenge.
Let's bring Rod in Oldham in. Rod, good morning.
Morning. I spoke on this before last year, and it's about having an integrated public transport system that is fit for purpose. And I know you've got £1 billion and all that, Andy, but we've got a system that in Shaw that's 10 and Oldham, a tram system that's 10-year-old. And every morning when I switch GMR on, I get on traffic, points failure on the Ashton line, points failure on the Oldham line. And it's not fit for purpose. It's less than 10-year-old. It cost us £37 billion in Manchester to build this thing. And it's already breaking down. How am I supposed to tell my gaffer when I get in 40 minutes late into city, sorry, tram broke down or points failed, or we've sat outside at Monsell for half an hour? It's absolutely scandalous. You said to me last time we had the 5th best one in Europe. Well, there used to be a saying in Oldham, come first, you get a gold medal, come 5th, you get a teapot. We got the bloody teapot.
Let me bring Andy in on that, Rod. So effectively what Rod's saying is cars are part of the pollution problem. I'm paraphrasing here, he has to use his car. He doesn't trust the transport system we've got here in Greater Manchester. How would you reply to that?
Well, I've been saying that, Mike, haven't I? The problem with air pollution is a reflection of the failure of successive governments to give us a proper public transport system of the kind that London has got. I mean, people have heard me say that before, but that is just true. We've got too much road traffic. That's what's causing the problem, because people don't have the alternative. So I'm not going to disagree with what's just been said.
He says the one we've got's knackered.
No, I don't. Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, obviously, Metrolink has challenges at times, as any public transport system does, but it's the best part of our public transport system. A lot better than the trains and a lot better than the buses. And what we need to do is integrate it, as he said, into that single London-style system. And that is a part of the solution here, Mike. I've kept saying that all the way through. But I think these sort of chickens are coming home to roost for the government. They promised to level us up. They haven't still put the money on the table to give us a London-style public transport system, and then the clean air zone's coming in. So it's kind of all coming together, and it's decision time, isn't it? It's decision time, and they need to decide: is levelling up real, or is it not?
Andy Burnham's in the hot seat. To go to Derek now in Openshaw. Derek, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
So I'm great,
Andy.
and Andy's
Hi,
here.
Derek.
Right, mate. I've got a van, and they have an allotment. I've had it for 35 years. And they go to town, near town, and we're going to get the shavings for the chickens because we don't pay for them. And we go to other joiners' shops to get the feed. But with me being, it's not a commercial, I don't do commercial stuff. It's a private van. How do I go on about this? Do I get a grant for my van? You have to get rid of it. I can't use a wife's car to put the straw, the hay, and the food in, and the shavings.
Andy?
Well, I'm glad you called in, Derek, because you are in exactly the category that I was mentioning earlier, where we said there are people who use, individuals, sole traders, whatever, people who use, let's say, an older van, possibly for their own uses or for business uses, who will find it really hard to change. And we need to be able to help those people. And we kind of asked for, we called it a hardship fund, and the government refused to provide the funding for that. So as I was saying earlier, Derek, that is where a lot of the problems with this began, because we knew there was going to be a real difficulty in helping people like you make the change. And so we started to say to the government, we're going to really struggle with this. And then Mike was putting callers to me last year who were making that point. I started to do more research on the vehicle market with the Greater Manchester leaders, and this has brought us to this point. This is where this has got very difficult. And I would say for you, it largely stems from that refusal to create the hardship fund. And all I can say is, people, are kind of wanting to say this is all, all us and we're not listening, but we are actually. And we would say, wish people could get behind us and say, right, let's go back to the government and say, for people like you, no, they have to put a deal on the table, a much better deal, to help you make the change. The thing to say, Mike, is,
Andy, just very quickly though, is there going to be, or is there potentially any help for the likes of Derek in the future?
Well, there could be, Mike, but the point is, it's kind of capped at the level that everyone's getting. Do you see what I mean? So there's like a minimum level of funding that everyone can get, but that might be available to people who've got a, much more, a healthy balance sheet and easy. And the point is, if your vehicle's old, it will only have a few £100 resale value. Whereas if you're trading up a vehicle that's much newer, it will have quite a high resale value. Then you take the grant from us, and roughly that would have kind of made up the money to help you get the new vehicle, and you end up with a new vehicle out of this. So, we weren't being ridiculous in saying actually this could work for some people, because for people who have to invest in their vehicles, this was an opportunity to get some public subsidy to get a newer vehicle. So, it's not. If people say it's a tax-raising scheme, it isn't, because the aim of this is to raise no money. The aim is to help everybody make the change, and therefore no fines come into the system. Job done, finished. That is the aim of the scheme. And I'll say it on this programme, Mike, and I want everyone to hear this. As long as I am mayor, I will never include private cars in the scheme, and I would never expand this to other, to a tax-raising scheme, i.e. a charge to use the roads. It is not a congestion charge. It is basically a scheme that is encouraging people, or trying to change their vehicles.
If this stays in place, though, Andy, and this is ongoing, you won't be the mayor forever. There are other areas that you may be headed to in the future, and you can make that promise. But is that incumbent on somebody that follows you?
Well, at the moment, people can obviously challenge me, whoever, at the next mayoral election, can't they? I mean, that's of course they can, and I'm picking up that some people may well be wanting to do that, but that you'd have to challenge those candidates, Mike. I will never introduce a congestion charge in Greater Manchester, and I will never include cars in the clean air zone.
Okay,
I cannot say it more plainly than that. Why? Because in my political career, I have always stood up for working people. I'm doing it again over this. People may not feel it yet, but I am, and they'll see more of that in the coming days. What can I say? I mean, those are firm commitments from me on this hot seat. Everyone can write them down, and you'd have to obviously then judge other candidates at a mayoral election.
Please just bear with us at the moment. As I say, we're absolutely inundated with calls. Lindsay in Blackrod is with us now. Hi, Lindsay. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning, and good morning, Andy.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hello there. So I'm just going to change the subject slightly. Well, not slightly, but from sole traders. So I live in Blackrod. I commute into Manchester. I can't avoid the clean air zone. So my question is around the scale of it. So obviously we're looking at pretty much, and please correct me if I'm incorrect, we're looking at the entirety of Greater Manchester. So I think it's fair to conclude that you can't avoid it. So when I travel into Manchester for work, obviously this is going to affect me. Now, I'm very pro-green. I'm looking at, already looking at electric cars so that, I can reduce my carbon footprint. But I think a lot of your kind of responses are this is on the government, this is a legal instruction. I accept that. However, who determined the scale of how far this zone will extend, i.e. across the entire Greater Manchester? Surely you and the 10 councils had some, consultation or some vote, or were able to put some sway in terms of the extent of it. I think that is a lot of the issue, because quite frankly you can't avoid it. I can't avoid it going into work when I commute into Manchester.
So Andy, it seems that the area, as far as Lindsay's concerned, is far too big.
So we did have responsibility for that, Lindsay. Let me not in any way shy away from that. That is right. That was the decision. But let me just explain how we came to that judgment. Myself and the other leaders. In the end, it's the councils that have to implement this. So it's not me imposing anything. Bolton Council, Trafford Council, Wigan Council, all the members of those councils have actually endorsed this as well. So this isn't just a kind of a diktat from me. It's come from the councils. The reason being, Lindsay, let me answer this as kind of specifically as I can. All 10 have illegal air in certain areas, not all over the borough, but pockets of it. And so how would they have dealt with that? If they'd gone to a sort of sub-zone within a borough to cover that area where there was a problem, obviously the traffic would have then just skirted that area and the problem would have moved to a different part of that borough. And what you would have been, a bit like a Swiss cheese, Mike, you'd have had these kind of zones scattered across Greater Manchester, where the boundaries would have to keep moving to chase the pollution, because obviously it would just keep moving from one part of a borough to another. In our view, that would have been unworkable, completely unworkable. And it comes from the fact that every council in Greater Manchester, all 10, have been given this legal instruction. And why does that happen? Because I think Greater Manchester's geography means that there's vehicles cutting through our area from all parts of the country, aren't they? They're not stopping here, many of them. They're just coming through our area, polluting it, and then carrying on to somewhere else. The M61 in your area, or the M60 for a lot of people. We are polluted for that reason, because lots of traffic is passing through, but for another reason, which I said before, which is our public transport system is nowhere near good enough. So lots of more people here are forced to use the roads than they are in other places, particularly London.
Let me just see if I can get these calls in now very quick. We've never had as many calls ever on a phone in, and we're inundated most weeks, but we have been rammed. If you've not been able to get through, we do apologise. The subject today has been the clean air zone, but if that's what you dictate, then that's what our agenda is. To Steve in Bury. Hi, Steve.
Hello, thank you for the call. I'd just like to know, when were these air quality measures taking place? How far back have we got data going to? When did we first start measuring how dirty the air was in these areas, please?
Oh, God. To be honest, Steve, I'm going to give you an unqualified answer. It goes back a long way. We've been measuring air quality in this country for years. I mean, it's got more sophisticated.
In particular to this proposed scheme, perhaps we're going back to 2015, I think I've seen figures for. So we are going back 7 years.
What's your question, Steve? And I need to move on.
My question is, has the air quality gone up or down since we started measuring 2015 to 2021 then?
So it was given out in 2015 because that's when the government first lost the court case. So everyone started focusing on the readings at that point in time. And I think it got worse because originally it was thought it was only in a small, well, not small number, but some of our boroughs, not all. But then it was revealed that it was actually in all. And the government's scientists accepted that it was in all of our boroughs. And I think it temporarily got better during the pandemic, definitely, because there was a drop-off in road traffic. But currently, the projection is that actually it will probably get worse than pre-pandemic levels. Why? Because there is a drop-off on people using the train. There was a drop-off on people using the tram and buses. And there are more people now back in cars again and in other vehicles. So it's a fair question, Stephen. We monitor it all the time. But the advice I'm getting is that the illegal air pollution is not going away, because actually the only thing that's recovered out of the pandemic from a transport point of view is road traffic.
I'm going to come in now very quickly, Andy, as I've got a quick text. I've never been as inundated, and I want to try and squeeze Anthony and Stockport in, but very quickly, Andy. Alex has just said, could the Mayor please explain his statement, I will never include private cars, but he has included camper vans and motorhomes with this. Many people use those as their sole private vehicle.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I mean, I appreciate sometimes I make statements off, as you said, Mike, I don't do it from notes on this, but I can see how, is it Steve, did he say? I can see how that Alex, sorry, is frustrating. It's the category of vehicle. This is how the zone works. The vehicles that you just mentioned, even though people use them for private use, motorhomes or camper vans, whatever, they are categorised as a van for the purposes of the zone. That's a DVLA thing, Mike. So I was talking about vehicles categorised as cars. But I take the point, there is a point there that needs to be addressed as well, and that is one of the other things that's being looked at the moment. So not trying to avoid the point, and I understand why it caused that reaction.
And final call, Anthony is in Stockport. Anthony, thank you so much for waiting. You are my final caller. I am running out of time, but good morning, and off you go.
Morning. Hey, Andy. Just to say, I voted for you as well. I voted Labour. I won't be doing it again if this goes through. What it is, the whole problem is the size of the area and the lack of information that's been given to people. It's been in the pipeline for so long, and I only found out just before Christmas. I'm a bricklayer, self-employed bricklayer. I bought a new van last year for $7,000. It's worth half that now, and I'm devastated, basically. It's the size of it. You're crucifying people, is what you're doing. The size of it.
So Anthony said that he just didn't know, and if he had known, he wouldn't have bought that van. And James has been in touch with a similar complaint.
Well, I understand sometimes how people kind of miss what's out there. But Mike, as I said, we were discussing this, weren't we? It was a big theme at the mayoral election. We've been consulting on it. The media hasn't covered it as much as probably we would have liked, but all of those things are true. The point about your van, though, Anthony, it's not going to half in value, because the value of that van is whatever it is currently outside of Greater Manchester, isn't it? So you can, and in London, they wouldn't let people keep the value of their existing vehicles. We're saying you could resell that van, and you add it together with the grant that you can get, and then obviously you can get a new vehicle. That was the logic of the scheme. The logic of the scheme has been unpicked because of the change in the cost of vehicles, the change in the vehicle supply market, and that's what we're reviewing at the moment. So, you mentioned the size of it. Well, I've mentioned that all of our councils have this legal instruction. And Mike, if I could just finish on the reason why, I realise we're up against the hour, but let's not lose sight of the fact that there are kids in boroughs in Greater Manchester, in the poorest communities, breathing in heavily polluted air. Surely we want to do something about that as Greater Manchester. So this isn't, for me, about saying we don't do anything about that. It's about saying, can we do it fairly and help people like Anthony, like everyone else who's called in on this programme this morning? Can we help people fairly get a newer vehicle out of this, clean up the air and make it work for everybody?
And to finish...
Currently, Mike, not working for everybody.
Okay.
I hear that loud and clear on the hot seat this morning. Let's come back to this issue next week when Greater Manchester leaders have discussed it at the meeting that we've called.
And I was just going to say, and can you perhaps improve the publicity and the communication that's going out there for everybody? Can you?
We recognise that. That's a fair point. We take that on board.
Andy, we've never had a phone-in like this in all the hot seats in nearly 2 years. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for all the calls, everybody.
Cheers. Andy Burnham with us next week. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, on the hot seat next Thursday here on BBC Radio Manchester.